Good morning. Hope that your Wednesday's off to a good start. I'm really happy you're going to spend a few minutes of your Wednesday with me. Excuse me just a second. Just a bit. I'm really glad you're going to spend a few minutes of a nice Wednesday morning with me. This is, of course, my second cup of coffee. My Yahweh mug. Probably shown it to you before. The little markings there on the front of the mug are the Hebrew script for the term Yahweh, which is the personal name for God, the holiest name for God. Over the last several weeks, I've been looking at some particularly difficult or tricky concepts or passages from the Bible. We began with the unpardonable sin from Mark chapter 3, verses 28 and 29. And then after that, we went to this notion of baptism for the dead, or baptism on behalf of the dead, from the middle of 1 Corinthians 15. And then from that, Jesus preached to the spirits in prison. And then today, we get to something maybe even stranger still than that. One of the most really mysterious passages in the whole Bible. It comes from Genesis chapter 6. And these first few verses of Genesis 6 are fodder for all sorts of speculation and theorizing, and an awful lot of ink has been spilled on it. I'm going to just read it for you. When man began to multiply in the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in, these were the mighty men of old, and the men of renown. So what in the world do we do with that? This is the sort of, I guess, fantastical stuff that you might see in daytime on the History Channel. The extra biblical book of Pimp, from what I understand, dwells a lot with these Nephilim and also other personages known as the Watchers. And the book of Enoch is popular for History Channel shows. I can't, by the way, it was attributed to Enoch, who was one of the descendants of Adam way back in the early Genesis genealogies, but it was actually written like a couple hundred years BC. So, who were the sons of God? How is it who were the sons of God? How is it that they have relations with human women? Who were the Nephilim? That is some really far out there stuff. The speculation leads all sorts of places. It leads to UFOs and Bigfoot and who knows what. Some of the speculation, if you just do a Google search, is legitimate. Do a search on YouTube. Some is legitimate, but just as much or even more is just way out there. So, what I'd like to do is just leave aside all the speculation. Leave aside all the speculation. Leave aside all the stuff that might be featured on the History Channel or a Discovery Channel show, and just look at the Bible. What does it say? Humanity has populated the earth. Humanity has populated the earth, and to that extent, they are doing what they were intended to do. Genesis 1, 28, 29, in that range, God tells them, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth. They're fulfilling what's called the cultural mandate. And then we have the weird stuff. The sons of God cohabitating, apparently, with the daughters of man. And that is, I mean, that sounds more like something out of mythology than Bible. So what do we do with it? Okay, first of all, the sons of God. Let's identify them, and then we move onward. Okay, so there are primarily three different ways of identifying these sons of God. One is to identify them with the descendants of Seth. So if you're not familiar with your Genesis genealogy, Adam and Eve have Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Abel, and then Cain is exiled. And then after that, they have Seth. And so according to one theory, the sons of God are the descendants of Seth, who was apparently a righteous man. And so that is one theory. Another theory is that the sons of God are kings who view themselves as being demigods, or kings who are perhaps even demonically possessed or demonically inspired. That is another way of looking at the sons of God. A third way of looking at the sons of God is to view them as being angelic beings of some sort. That is probably, like, logically, that's the hardest for us to wrap our minds around, in my opinion. But, in my opinion, it's also the most logical. Simply in terms of biblical interpretation, is the one that makes the most sense. When you see the phrase sons of God used in the Old Testament, it always refers to the supernatural entities. We see the phrase the sons of God in Job 3 different times, and each time it is a member of the heavenly court, an angel or some sort of angelic being, celestial being. We also see in Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are tossed into the fiery furnace, and when Nebuchadnezzar and his henchmen look into the furnace, they see a fourth person who's described as being like a son of the gods. So, just as a matter of interpretation, I think that the sons of God in this case are some sort of angelic being. Exactly who they are, I'm not going to speculate, but it is probably some sort of angelic being. Now, the difficulty with this, if you know your New Testament, is that Jesus in Matthew 22 refers to, he's answering a question that deals with the resurrection life, and he says that in the resurrection will be neither married nor given in marriage, and will be like the angels who are neither married nor given in marriage. So is there some tension there between the interpretation of Genesis 6 and 22? Potentially. There is potentially some tension there. I have read this, and who knows whether this is a good solution or not. I have read that in Matthew 22, they're neither married nor given in marriage. That we can draw a distinction between being married and having the ability to procreate, if you will. That angels aren't married, but it is possible for them to have relations with humans. And this, again, this is sort of, it sounds way out there, but that is, to my mind, the straightforward reading of the text. Here's another difficulty with this. After these relations, these sons of God they come to human women, but God curses humanity, and there's a difficulty there because the fault obviously was with these sons of God, whom I would anticipate would be fallen angels of some sort. There's logically a problem there, and I don't know the solution for it, but there's an awful lot in the Bible I don't understand. So let's move on to the next really they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not be in man forever, for his flesh, his days should be 120 years. That we can't take that woodenly, literally, because Noah lived, speaking from this point onward, the lifespan given is much shorter. There were people who lived beyond 120 years after this. Abraham did, and numerous others. But in general, after this, the lifespans aren't nearly as long as they were before, where you have lifespans 600, 700, 800 years. After this, they do tend to be shorter. And then we have the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So what about these Nephilim? Normally this word is, normally the word is just transliterated, and it is because the meaning of the word is uncertain, the derivation of the word is uncertain. It probably means something like fallen one. But it is normally transliterated because it's a term that is only used once elsewhere in the Old Testament. Its meaning, its derivation is a little unknown. The text implies that the Nephilim were the offspring of these unnatural relations between the sons of God and the daughters of man. And actually, just identification of the sons of God. The sons of God, daughters of man. That leads, that also, just that pairing off, does lead, I think, to identifying the sons of God as being of some sort. The text does not specifically say that the Nephilim were the offspring of those relationships. It implies it, but doesn't specifically. That's when the Israelites send their spies into the land of Canaan. They send spies into the land of Canaan, and they report back. And the 12 spies report back. 10 of them say that the people in the land were giants, and they felt like grasshoppers compared to them. And Numbers 13 refers to Anakim, or the descendants of Anak, who was descended from the Nephilim. So the Nephilim are referred to in Numbers 13, and the sons of Anak, the descendants of Anak, are said to be related to these Nephilim, which leads to yet another question. What about the flood? The flood comes, Noah's flood comes right after the Nephilim. So if the flood erases all life on earth except for Noah and his family and the animals that were brought into the ark, how did the Nephilim survive the flood? And again, there's a built-in tension there. Here's some potential theories. One is that the flood didn't really cover the whole world, but it was more of a regional flood, and when the Bible says it covered the whole world, that's exaggeration, if you will. And that I could see that as being a possibility. Some have theorized potentially that in Noah's family there was genetics, if you will, from these Nephilim that Noah's family carried, or particularly his son's wives carried. That's also a theory that gets bandied about, but what the answer is, I don't know. Numbers 13 says that there were in the land of Canaan descendants of someone named Anak, who was of great stature, and these Anakim were related to, or they were descendants of the Nephilim. Another theory that comes along is that even after the flood, there was another instance where the sons of God had relations with human women. Again, that's not mentioned in the scripture, but that is a theory that gets bandied about, but it's not referred to. So that's where we are. The Nephilim were the mighty men of old, men of renown, and they apparently were the offspring of these unnatural relations between angelic beings and human women, the daughters of man, as Genesis puts it. So, bottom line is this, that sometimes the more difficult reading is the more logical one, if that makes sense. This more difficult reading is the most logical one, because the Bible is, when you think about textual variants, a textual variant, one ancient manuscript says this, another ancient manuscript says this. In general, you go with the one that is the more difficult, because an ancient scribe isn't going to alter it to make it more harder to read. They're going to, if anything, alter it to make it easier to read. So I hedge toward the reading that is the more difficult. And in this case, certainly sons of God being angelic beings is more difficult. So that's sort of where I come down, and that is the way most interpreters read it. The Nephilim were apparently the offspring from them, though that is not spelled out. There are tensions between this and other parts of the Bible. There are tensions between, like I mentioned, tension between identifying the sons of God as being fallen angels or celestial beings, and Matthew 22. There's a tension there. There is a tension between the concept that the Nephilim were around after the flood, because the flood, we are told, destroyed all life on earth. And that's okay. It is okay for there to be tensions between one part of the Bible and another. I sort of take it that one part of the Bible isn't going to directly contradict another. I don't think we'll see that, but it is entirely possible that there's going to be some tension between one passage and another passage, and that's okay. That's an invitation for us to study more and reflect more. There are parts that are harder to understand than others. There are parts which are going to be hard to interpret or understand in light of something else, and that's okay as well, because we don't know everything, and we probably can't know everything. One more thing, one little juicy tidbit that I will toss out there related to the Nephilim. We have all heard of David and Goliath. We've all heard of David and Goliath from Sunday school, preschool even. Now, the mighty giant Goliath is almost certainly a descendant from the Anakim, who were said to be descendants from the Nephilim. As geographically, Goliath, he is a Philistine, and there were a number of giants. It wasn't just Goliath, there were a number of Philistine giants, including Goliath, and the towns that the giants came from were also places where the Anakim had fled. So it is normally thought that Goliath was related to the Anakim, who were descendants from the Nephilim. And I mentioned textual variants. So how tall was Goliath? 9 feet tall. You can look this up sometime, play around with it. Goliath was either 9 feet 9 inches tall, if you follow one manuscript tradition. If you follow another manuscript tradition, he is about 6'9".